Welcome to today's workshop on the ESRC PhD Studentships. Today's session is the first part of a two-part series on the ESRC PhD Studentships. Today's session is going to be more informational, and then with panelists talking about the different DTPs that form part of the ESRC funding sort of consortium, and then we will do a more interactive session tomorrow at the same time with a breakout room format where mentors will be in one breakout room each, and you can ask them questions depending on what your interest is. So what we're going to be doing today, I will very quickly introduce you to Project EduAccess and introduce you to your panelists, who will then take over, give you an overview of the studentships. They will tell you what it covers, tell you a little bit about the DTPs, talk to you about the eligibility, application process, timeline, selection process, give you some tips on making a good application, and then talk to you specifically about each of the DTPs that I've mentioned on the slide. And then we do a Q&A. So very quickly, we are Project EduAccess. We believe, sorry. Okay. Excuse me, sorry. We believe that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are systematically denied through cost, information, and dispositional barriers. And we try to improve inclusivity in these spaces by removing some of these barriers for marginalized communities in the global South. We do this by adopting 4 key interventions, which involves mentoring, counseling, role modeling, information, advice, and guidance, capacity building, leadership skill development, and evidence-based advocacy. To help us with our mission more generally and to speak to you today, we have with us 5 very wonderful panelists. We have with us Hitasha, who is part of the Grand Union DTP on the economics pathway. We have with us Abhishek, who's on the Grand Union DTP on the education pathway. We have with us Ishita, who's on the Northwest Social Science DTP. We have thus Jyoti Rupa, who's on the Scottish Graduate School of Social Science, which is the Scottish ESRC, and then Hitesh, who received offers from both the London Interdisciplinary Social Science DTP and the South and East Network for Social Sciences DTP. Thank you all of you for joining the session today. We're really grateful that you're speaking to our audience, and I will hand it over to Hitesh.
Thanks, Misbah. So as the title of this workshop suggests that it's about ESRC, and which is Economic Social Research Council, which is part of this organization called UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, which offers studentships to support PhD students, to cover fees, then living cost, and then other training and development opportunities. And what includes that training and development opportunities, we will learn, in the next slides. So UKRI is a non-departmental public body, and which is usually sponsored by Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. We cannot apply to these studentships directly. You have to go through research organizations. That is, for us, it's normally university. And UKRI creates these groups or cohorts of 2 or more universities to fund research students, which is called as DTPs, Doctoral Training Partnerships. And it also creates group and cohorts for the funding sponsors, and it could be UKRI itself and some other governmental bodies, or maybe some funds from the universities, museums, archives, and then industrial laboratories as well. It's open to all prospective doctoral students, including international students, but the limit is only 30%, and they only take 30% of international students outside the UK. That is outside the UK. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, and minimum stipend through such studentships is 19,237 per annum pounds. But if your university falls under university within London, then you have additional 2,000 pounds per annum to cover your living cost, and it covers minimum of 4,000 to 5,000 fees, tuition fees, which is the rate usually for UK students. And some of them also covers, the full international fees, but not all. And of course, we'll learn more in the next slides that for some DTPs, your host organization, that is your university, can cover that gap between the international fees and the local or the UK student home fees. These organizations mostly advertise student opportunities on the websites like Find a PhD, but of course they have their own websites as well. And these opportunities might be listed on the university's websites as well. But when I applied during my times, for some universities, it was not mentioned on their websites. But yeah, mostly you can find that over there. So this is very important that, to understand that they have their own application deadlines, and which does not coincide with the deadlines for the university applications. And usually the applications for all UKRI studentships starts during October to November and closing by January and February end, either January end or February start. So we need to be a bit mindful about the deadlines and how the university application deadlines vary from the UKRI studentships. Can I have next slide, please? Yeah, so what does it cover? So mostly, of course, it covers the fees. And as we already have seen in the last slides, that home or UK tuition fees is surely covered, which is around 4,000 to 5,000 pounds. And sometimes also for international students, the fees almost go around 20,000 pounds. And then there is a gap of the 16,000, which is usually paid by UKRI itself. For example, in terms of Grand Union DTP, you will get the whole studentship award. Also for SCNSS, you will get the whole studentship award, and it will cover international fees. But for LISS DTP, that fees should be covered either by you or by your host institution, that is your university. It provides a tax-free maintenance stipend, which is around, again, as we have already seen, 19,237 per year. And then if your university falls under the London boroughs, then, which is called as London vetting. And according to that, you get additional 2,000 pounds per year to cover your cost of living. And then there are these two more sources of funding. One is, of course, research training support funds, which is around, maximum 3,500 pounds. And you can use it to cover your conferences cost, or maybe some other summer schools or any kind of research activity which you will carry out during your PhD studentship hour. There are some additional access funds, so access to some additional funds, which covers cost, some other costs, for example, overseas field work or the UK field work. That depends on the DTP to DTP. Some DTPs might not cover this cost, but some might cover. Then you have also this component called overseas institutional visits, using which you can spend 3 months in any institution outside the UK. And then you also have funds for language training for some DTPs. And then, of course, most of them provide placements and internships. And it has its own way of functioning. For example, if you're doing internship, you get your 3 months extension for your studentship hour if you want to be in 4th year writing up period. Yeah, that will be all. And I will hand it over to Ishita.
Thank you, Hitesh. So the UK government, according to from or the UKRI funds DTP, is a way of them for the UK government to fund scholarships for the masters and doctoral program through the DTPs. There are 7 research councils amongst there which fund research, and ESRC, which is the Economic and Social Research Council, is one of them. The ESRC has 14 different DTPs, some of them being the Grand Union, the LISS DTP, which are groups of universities which are put together to fund or give scholarship and studentships to particular students. The next slide. For the eligibility, you should have a UK honors degree at the a UK honors degree equivalent or a master's degree. And in most cases, at least in my case, was a case where the host university was able to help you check if you were eligible for the DTP. Also, degree qualifications outside the UK can include a combination of qualifications and experiences relevant to the degree. And as Hitesh also mentioned, that the proportion of international students within every DTP is capped at around 30%. So of all the DTPs that are awarded in a particular cohort, only 30% are reserved for international students. The next slide. The application process for most of the DTP, where it goes as follows, where you can, for every program that you wish to apply for, you can check in the program and the funding for the particular program, where you can look at the different DTPs associated. I mean, the only single DTP associated with it. If you also visit the DTP website, you can look at the courses and the universities which are associated with the particular funding. And in many cases, there are also collaborative projects with with non-academic organizations, and these opportunities are put out as jobs or research opportunities outside. You need to find a supervisor who's able to support you throughout the process, and discuss your research proposal and research interest with the supervisor before making an application. In most cases, the supervisors will play an important role in your application process for the DTP. And in more, so the DTP or the UK Research and Innovation Group also focuses on trying to understand the social impact of your research proposal. That is a component which they list is very important. This is important. At the same time, you also have a section where you need to maybe fill out any potential collaborations with non-academic organizations. NGOs in this case could be one of them. And it might not be necessary, but if there's a potential for it, you can list it down there. Methods training that you have gone through before during your undergrad or masters is something that you need to mention. At the same time, you can also you also need to list down the training that might be required for you to successfully carry out your research. The next slide. So here we list down a few two examples from what is required for an application. For the Grand Union DTP, you essentially required a summary of your research proposal, a plan for overseas fieldwork, or any language training required to carry out the same. Personal statement, the collaboration for non-academic institutions, prior research methods training, and if there are additional sections for advanced qualitative methods. So every DTP will mention certain areas which they would be keen to work on. So quantitative methods is one of them. The LISS DTP, on the other hand, has 4 parts. One would be the student application for a +3, 1+3 or a +3 application, an online supervisory statement, copy of your transcripts, a reference from a person who, other than your supervisor, so someone with whom you have worked in the past, or I think it can also be an employer or a professor, someone who's taught you, to send a reference letter for the LISS application. Now I think I'll hand over to Jyoti Rupa. Thank you.
Thanks, Ishita. Hi, everyone. Okay, so we're going to talk about the timeline. So it says deadlines are university specific. Usually meaning you'll have to find out what is the relationship between the DTP's timeline and the universities, which might have different criteria across different DTPs. So what happens with SGSSS, which is my DTP, is that you don't need like a confirmed, like unconditional offer from the university before you apply for the scholarship or the studentship. You can start the process. You'll have a supervisor in place, and then you can just start applying for it. So you have to apply to the university by the university deadline. Of course, that is that pertains to the university. You do that, and the DTP deadline. And there will be multiple deadlines because there are many stages of it. We'll talk about it in the next slide or so. Okay, so the selection process is more or less the same across the DTPs. This is an example from the Grand Union DTP, which you can see on the screen, which you can refer to later because you'll have access to the slides, but which I won't speak about much since I did not apply for it. I'll speak to you more about the SGSSS process. So there are 3 stages for it. There is the Higher Education Institution Review, where first, your application will be looked at by people within your university. This depends on the challenge pathway that you apply for, which is something I'll tell you more about once we talk specifically about the SGSSS DTP. So basically, these are just different fields in which you might be working, and then there will be people from these fields in your university, and they will figure if your application is a good application. Then they send it ahead to the next path, which is the challenge-led pathway review, which is on a larger inter-university kind of scale, where within each challenge pathway, they will see if your application is a good application. So this is usually reviewed by 2 people who are not from university. And then if you make it through this, you go to the global stage review. So there you have all the applications, and then they just make their final choices. Now, the selection criteria for the SGSSS, which again, it will be similar for all DTPs more or less, but here specifically, they talk about candidate capabilities, research proposal, and supervision and PGR development. So in candidate capabilities, again, as you'll see later, as I've mentioned in my SGSSS slide, they go for like a whole person approach. So like if you look at the language they use in a lot of their documents, they are like, how will you flourish as a result of PhD funding? How are you, why should you get this funding? Depending on where you are in life and so on and so forth. So they are not fully like, oh, you have done great academically, so you must get this. They are concerned about how will you contribute, how does this help you, and so on and so forth. So, and the good thing about it is, like, you will find lots of details about how they mark your applications. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, they will tell you how much points, like what are they looking for each point. So you can, there are lots of resources. We can discuss that. So that is useful. Research proposal, if you have just come from your master's or are still completing your master's, then they write on their website that it's okay, they understand if you don't have a fully fleshed out proposal per se. They're happy if you show that you have a research idea which is innovative, which is original, which looks doable, and so on and so forth. Supervision and PGR development, I thought personally for me and for my application, my supervisor was extremely helpful. And like Ishita said, this plays I think, a huge role in how your application goes. It's necessary to show that you have a very good fit with the supervisor and with the various other components of the university, such as what other departments they might have, what working groups they might have, where else your work fits into. So this is the sort of scenario. Okay, could you have the next slide? Now, there are some core training requirements because it's called a doctoral training program. There are many training requirements all the time. But the thing with them is also that while they ask for a lot of training, like we can see, you are expected to have 75% of the following training. So research design in social sciences, which includes a lot of things, including qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, and other research design elements, and general research theory things that we learn, like generalizability, validity, reliability, etc. Then data collection, management, dissemination, and then social theory and epistemology. So all the ideas that we learn about, such as postcolonial critique, Marxism, positivism. Now, if you, I would imagine if you have been to like central university or state universities in India mostly, we should have had some module where we had to learn some of these things. It doesn't have to be in great detail. Like I feel like most of us in our master's courses have some paper where these things are mentioned, and that's usually good enough. Just mention these courses, tell them this is what the syllabus included, and that should do for the time being. Also, because they are so concerned about training, they will train you anyway. Like, so they do like a 3.5 funding and a 1 plus 3.5 funding. I'll tell you later. But like for nobody in my cohort that I know of, nobody was supposed to like not take training. We all had to take training. So they'll train you anyway. So it doesn't matter so much if you have not covered a lot of these things, at least for like, so I think they will train you in the future in any case. Okay, could you go to the next one? These are more details about the qualitative methods and quantitative methods. The ones that we usually hear of are here. In social sciences in India, of course, we don't have so much quantitative methods training generally for a lot of courses a lot of the times, but they will make you do a course once you go to university on this training program. So it should not be a problem. But if you have done any work, even if it's not in your academic life, but in some job areas where you have done interviews, any sort of data analysis or whatever else you have done, it is ideal, I think, to mention it to show that you have experience in the field, or anything you might have done as part of a social science course where you did some sort of field work. All of this is useful. Just mention whatever background you have in any sort of methodological training. Okay, that's all for now. I'll hand it over to Abhishek.
Hi, thank you so much, Jyotirupa, for that. So, a few tips. One thing that I think the previous speakers have established is that the process is not consistent across DTPs. So every DTP sort of has a different priority, and also because there are different partnering organizations. So the organizations or the universities would have their own priorities and preferences. So it's difficult to give very specific advice on what exactly should go into a DTP application. I think there's plenty of material on each website, and there are pathway leads. So the pathway leads are clearly shown on the website, so you can write to them and understand from them what their priorities are. So again, I'll reiterate what the previous speakers have said, that connect with your supervisor. If you know that there is someone you want to work with and you know that it is covered within the DTP priorities, then speak with them, make this very clear with them. So I think they will sort of give you the guidance that is needed. Also, there are DTP coordinators for each university. So they would also give you the best advice. So I think before going into these general tips, it's important to know that there's information out there, and this is going to be a little different from other scholarships, like let's say Rhodes or Gates, which has a very standard set protocol. This will be different from different universities, and it also changes once, let's say, the ESRC's studentships have been renewed. So for example, this year Grand Union DTP got a renewed funding from ESRC. So some of their priorities and some of their components have changed. For example, this year they have, from this year, they have 3 months of compulsory placement, which was optional when I started. So yeah, those kind of things. Now, one thing that ESRC is very hung up on is impact. I'll put a link to how ESRC defines impact, but within your application, you need to show how your research is not just contributing to some theoretical growth. Of course, that's important, but it has to speak to a greater impact. So see how you can communicate what impact your project will have, whether it's through collaboration, whether it's through working with other partnering organizations. That's why they also have the placements and the overseas institutional visit. We also have conference funding so that you are able to not just focus on your project, but also connect with the wider society. So yeah, and another thing is that you can use different things that you have done in the past to speak to your research profile. For example, it does not have to be the courses that you took in your MA or MPhil. It could also be that your work as a research assistant on a project would have taught you how to organize your research, how to do literature review, how to carry out field work. So speak about that as well. I think one of the things that I've realized after coming here is that we as Indians and South Asians, we sort of feel like नहीं हमने तो बस जाके 5 survey किए थे, that's not much. But that's also, I know of people who have done really good work at grassroots, but they feel that, oh, it's not worth mentioning, or it's not, it's not as good as let's say a fancy degree in research. No, I think sometimes it's valued more because, if you've worked with grassroots organization, if you've done that kind of work, so try to bring that into your application as well. Hitasha, have I left anything? Do you want to share anything here?
Not really, although I would like to just um, give a little caveat to the point number 2 here on the slide, because for me, I think I'm in economics, and it's not a common practice for us in our discipline to contact supervisors because it's not fruitful. It just because there's just a lot of applicants and they don't respond, so it's generally understood within the field that it's not compulsory or important. You can definitely try if you have the time in your application process. If you've already covered all the other things, you can do this as an additional step, but this doesn't make or break your application. So if there's anyone who wants to apply for an economics pathway, I just wanted to mention this little caveat. Yeah. Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. I think most of the points here have already been covered, but I would just like to, reiterate that the application has specific questions about the courses that you've taken and the methods training, the quantitative training that you've gone through. And it's useful to list down the courses, sometimes even like 1 or 2 textbooks, because it really shows that your training is at par with the level required for your program. And just like Abhishek mentioned, all your field work, your grassroots work is valued. And I think the ESRC funding aligns really well with this kind of work, which connects with the real world. So I think it's a very strong point to mention if you have such experience. And yeah, one thing which I sort of did wrong is looking at the application at the last minute, which I think you should not do, because the questions are not hard, because you just have to talk about your life, your experiences, but the questions are long, and the more that you understand them, the better answers you'll be able to frame. I think it's a good idea to customize your answers to answer the specific questions. And there is also a space for writing about your personal life experiences and some personal challenges that you faced and how they've shaped your career in general, and like your academic achievements, your academic career. So I think you should really use that space to highlight any challenges that you faced growing up within the global South context, even the South Asian context. um, and Yeah, and it's obviously a good idea to have as many people go through your materials as possible, your friends, but also your mentors. And all of this will be easier for you if you do the application on time. So I think for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the DTP application was available through my university application portal, and these usually open up way before the deadline, that I think 2 to 3 months before the deadline. So you should keep an eye on when the form opens, and I think it's generally like a general tip for even your university applications. You should just look at the form, even if you're not ready to fill it, you're not prepared yet, just look at the form and also the DTP form, so that you can start thinking about and forming your answers in advance. Yeah, I think that's all that I have to say. Abhishek, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think one thing that she said about the questions being quite long. So the questions are not just, oh, tell us this. They ask us, like, there's specific detail about why that question is being asked. And also you can map it against the scoring criteria. So previously someone showed the 4 scoring criteria for GUDTP. So whenever you write your answers, just see how they map against those criteria, right? What speaks to your academic qualification, what speaks to the strength of your doctoral research, what speaks to your overall academic performance earlier. So I think the questions are quite straightforward, and you might be tempted to sometimes just copy paste what you have written in your original sort of university application into these things, but probably they're looking for something else, something more specific. So please do not fill it out in a hurry. Yeah, I think that's. And these are some resources. So the UKRI website sort of has a very metadata of all the DTPs and everything. So if you really want to get into specifics, you need to get into the DTP website, and then you have to go to the university website, the partnering universities of it. So it is a lot of surfing around to find the right information. But yeah, I would advise that even if there is something on the website, still speak with the DTP coordinator or the people who are currently in charge, because sometimes the websites are not updated. And so yeah, I know that for GUDTP, that some of the information out there is for 2022-23. So that might not be relevant for your application now. So it's always a good idea to confirm things with the consent people. Yeah, next slide. Hitesh?
Yeah, thank you. So let's talk about LISS DTP, the long form of which is London Interdisciplinary Social Sciences Doctoral Training Partnership, which is led by King's College London. And it is in partnership with Imperial College London and Queen Mary University of London. So LISS DTP provides this studentship across these 3 universities or institutions within the London, and they are, also situated very close to each other in London. So students who are joining LISS DTP are, as I said, registered at King's, Queen Mary or Imperial. And unfortunately for LISS DTP, you need to have either unconditional or conditional offer before you apply for it. So make sure that you are applying to the university earlier than the deadline. So this DTP only funds home tuition fees for international students, and reminder has to be paid in 3 ways, either by applicants department. So for example, if I'm situated within international development department, then Department of International Development will fund it, or the whole institution, host institution as such. So because they have these 2 components of funding as well. Department has separate funding at King's, and that might be true for Imperial and Queen Mary as well. And the King's as a whole institution has different kind of funding resources. So they will think of it through which you can be funded. Or if you don't get either of these, then you will have to, unfortunately self-fund. But I have seen very less number of applications where people have had to, resort to this self-funding thing. If it's King's, then you do not have to apply for this additional funding for this reminder fees. King's automatically considers your application as such. But if it's Imperial or Queen Mary, the funding process for this reminder fee is different. So if you are applying to Imperial or Queen Mary, please be sure that you have already sorted it out and you have asked or discussed it with your supervisors, and also have seen what are the deadlines, what are the processes for it. So LISS offers 2 kind of courses, 2 kind of studentships. One is 1+3, which is masters plus PhD, and another is +3, which is PhD only. So this depend upon, as you know, Jyotirupa took us through core training requirements. It depends on that. So that on LISS DTP website, it is clearly mentioned that you have to discuss it with your supervisors whether you fulfill 60% of this requirement or not. If you don't fulfill this requirement, then the supervisors will ask you to apply for 1+3, that is masters plus PhD, and cover the coursework within your masters. Because at King's, or maybe it might be true for Imperial and Queen Mary, I'm not sure, but for King's for sure, in +3, you do not have many methods courses to, credit or even audit. I mean, you can do that, but it becomes afterwards a bit hectic to manage your PhD and these courses as well. So it depends then how you demonstrate it through your application and how you put it into the application. Like Abhishek also mentioned, you need to connect it with your courses, master's courses, and you can actually put, even if it's a very small project and you have done some data collection, you should mention it as method training as such. So it should not be that we have learned all these things only during your masters or even bachelor. So even if you are not masters, you still can apply for +3 PhD program through LISS DTP. But you should have completed that ESRC core training requirement. And of course, the application process can be found downside. I just want to cover a few points here that for LISS DTP applications, I guess you should run the application through supervisors, because they might have the previous students who have successfully secured these scholarships, and some of them might have been on the committees of this evaluation as well. And in my case, that was really helpful because one of the supervisor was on the committee, and it helps because LISS DTP application is trickier. I think it's unnecessarily trickier, and they have made it complex. It shouldn't be like that, but anyway, we have to somehow manage with it and take as much as help you can ask for supervisors. Do not hesitate. It's supervisor's job to take you through, because it's also beneficial to them to have a student who have received some kind of fundings. So it's not just you who is getting benefited, it's supervisors as well, and it goes on their track record also. So please approach supervisors and run it through. And that's why, as we have been saying, that start your application a bit early. And you might find PDFs on these websites as well of the applications, and you can go through these questions which they have asked, and you start preparing it right away, maybe once you have got green signal from supervisors. Yeah, can we move to next slide, please? Yeah, now Southeast Network for Social Sciences SENS makes it more trickier, the process, unfortunately, again. But it's not it's not undoable. It's very much doable, but it's lengthier. It's lengthier than LISS DTP applications, because it has many kind of funding student or studentships, or the kind of courses which they provide. So the best part about SENS is all studentships are fully funded. You don't really have to worry about the reminder between the international phase and the home phase. And as it is mentioned on their website, I am putting it outstanding supervision, which I do not vouch for, but yeah, you might get it. Of course, it depends on you. So they also provide high quality advanced training. This I can vouch for, because I have done some courses through SENS, even though I didn't opt for it, and those were really good. Especially some courses were taken provided by East Anglia and the Royal Holloway, and those were the methods courses, and I found them really, really helpful. Then it also has 11 kind of pathways, but you do not find one. Each pathway is specific to the university. So if you are applying to international development, and if that pathway is available for success, that might not be there for Royal Holloway or the Goldsmiths. So it's there on their web. You can find it then on their websites which pathway is being provided or accessed by which university. So be mindful about that and apply accordingly. And then, of course, as again, they have mentioned a way for social sciences research to make a difference, of course. Yeah, can I have next slide, please? Yeah, and this is where it becomes, trickier. Now it's 13, sorry, I said 11 pathways, but there are 13 pathways, and 11 are for LISS DTP, I guess. So masters again here for SENS is not a prerequisite. With bachelor's also you can apply, because they provide you 4 kind of models. One is 1+3, which was same as it was for LISS DTP, masters plus PhD. then there is 2+2 as well. So I'm not sure how 2+2 is being provided, and that information is not clear on their website as well. But when I inquired, I found it's mostly for people who have already completed MPhil and they still feel short of some core training requirement. And then there is +4, which is kind of, you can arrange it in your own way. So suppose if we consider 4 as one whole number, maybe you need only 0.5 amount of training from 4, then they will only provide you and adjust your course accordingly, and they will suggest you to do only few courses and carry forward with your PhDs. So applications who are wishing to apply for this 1+3, 2+3, or +4 should normally possess or are expected to achieve the date by the date they take up their studentships, a bachelor's degree with honors from recognized university or equivalent, or even master's is fine for that. And I think, not I think, but I'm sure that whoever or does masters from India, they have already covered most of the trainings, and they actually meet these eligibility criteria of core training requirements. And even though we might not have the courses with explicit names as advanced qualitative methods or advanced quant methods, we still might have covered it in through some other courses during our masters. So just be mindful and take out the syllabus of your master's courses and see if that has been covered. Even if not, even if it was the implicit part of some kind of small project or some kind of small course or a lecture in your masters, that still stands valid, and you still can write it down on your application. And applicants who are wishing to apply for +3 award must normally have successfully completed an appropriate research training, master's degree or equivalent access training, or demonstrably equivalent professional experience. That means it's the same. You need to meet the requirements criteria from core trainings, which Jyotirup already have taken us through. And yes, I guess that's it for now for these 2 DTPs, and maybe tomorrow we can have the more detailed discussions about it. Thank you so much.
So the Northwest Social Science DTP is a consortium of 5 universities, of which Liverpool, Manchester are some of them. Essentially, they also fund a master's and a doctorate, or just a doctorate program, and they will not fund a standalone master's program, which is mentioned on their website. They also have 21 pathways within subject area pathways like accounting, economics, planning and environment, politics, social anthropology. And I think for me personally, the question was that I came from a economics bachelor's. I did a master's in public policy. And today my pathway is planning and environment, which just was very different. And I never thought that I wasn't sure if I could have applied for it, but it was a constant to and fro between my supervisors who were able to go through my research proposal and suggest the DTP, the pathway I could apply under. If you, the website also within these pathways, if you go through, I would suggest that whichever DTP you wish to apply for, go in and out through the website. There'll be every possible detail provided there. So for example, within say the economics subject area pathway, if you go within that link, they will provide a list of degrees which the partner universities you can apply for. So you can either go from the partner university to the DTP website, or from the DTP website to the partner university. Then and yeah, I think interdisciplinarity is something which even after my movement to UK, I've realized is something that the UK research group or center is pushing for. So it doesn't matter if you come from economics and you want to study something that is human geography, like in my case, if you have a strong proposal which your supervisors will help you with. They did in my case. Like we had a to and fro. So that is okay. I think you can still go ahead with it. The application components for the Northwest Social Science CTP are relatively direct. I feel that there's a Word document that you have to fill, which will include a research proposal. Including the references, the proposal should be within the limit of 1,500 words. A personal statement of around 750 words, and they will give you a detail of what they are expecting from the personal statement. So I'd advise that you go through that detail, read what they are asking for, and then work on writing your response. Then there's a development needs analysis, which they mention on the Word document itself, will not directly contribute towards determining the outcome of your award, but it's just for the organization, the funders, to understand where you are in terms of academics, in terms of your skills and developmental needs. And here it's a larger section, and it's a section which requires you to look into like smaller aspects of your past life. So when Abhishek mentioned about if you have carried a survey, but for me it was surprising to see that also there was a question where with respect to my managerial task, like how do I manage my everyday, what do I use? So and all my answers, whatever I wrote in this filled in this form, were cross-checked with my supervisor. So I wrote a draft of it. I sent it to my supervisors. They gave me a feedback on it, and then I improved on it. But they wanted me to mention if at all I used any software. So, for example, if I was using something like a Notion or something to do my daily activities, or any other thing, they wanted me to mention that. So, these smaller tasks, I think even if they might not determine the outcome, are important to be filled in, and you would ideally spend a bit much more time on this, because these questions are something that no other of my applications asked me to look into. And I think so. The fact that I'd applied for a 3 years scholarship, but eventually when I got my award, I got a 3.5, and that was after assessing not just the time frame of my research and the components of my research, but also probably development needs. So I was awarded something a 0.5 year more than that. Alongside this, important section or important part in the website is the how to apply section. There you'll get examples of previously successful studentship applications, and I would say they are like updated every year, because the current ones I saw are not the ones that I referred to. And this will give you the entire document that is there, which was filled by other students who received the application. So I'd advise everyone to go through that, see how the answers are framed. And yeah, so I think that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashita. Hi again. Okay, so the SGSSS DTP, that is the lingo, by the way, and not SGSSS, as I used to say before. So it is UK's largest facilitator of funding. So it covers around 14 universities. I would name them, but that would be boring. But generally, like there is my university, there is Edinburgh, there is Stirling, Strathclyde, Glasgow, and some other universities. So as I was saying, they say on the first page that they are going for a whole person approach. So again, it's a good idea while applying to speak to your friends. Of course, nobody knows you as well as you do. And I'm going to suggest the first draft you make of your application for all of this is something you write yourself and don't listen to anyone else about. Take everything else as supplementary knowledge, the things that others say, but for yourself, make an application where you talk about the university you're applying to, the funding body you're asking for, everything else in terms of exactly how this is a great fit for you. Like I read somebody else's application recently where they mentioned every important point, but it did not show how it was tailored to the specific application they were making, and like not like just a general application instead. So for this, why you're applying to this specific training fund, you might want to say that you are applying that this DTP provides you with training in the specific fields, and you are interested in having that kind of training because it will be good for your career, your PhD research, or for anything else, and so you're applying to this DTP. Try to make it as tailored as possible. And again, as I said about your university as well, find out other departments, other research groups. Your supervisor will help you through all of it, as the other panelists have been telling us, to exactly tailor your application for what you are applying to. When you talk about anything such as your background, your personal life, and so on and so forth, make sure you tie that up with the impact that you are saying your research will make. So suppose you are saying, I come from this background, and so I have seen these things happen in life, which is why I'm working on this topic. All of this won't be so related all the time, of course, but just pull everything in together and explain to them why you need to be at this university with this scholarship at this point in time. Now, the studentships, so there are two actually studentships for SGSSS right now. There is a 3.5 and there's a 1 plus 3.5. They used to have a 3, but as I said, they are going to provide you training regardless, I think. So this, they make you take some courses in either your university or a different university which provides them. So you do some quant method training, some research methods, some qualitative method training, and so on and so forth. If you have a 1 plus 3, then you have like MRIS probably at the beginning. But if you get that, actually, I think it's not a bad thing, because at the end of that degree, you end up writing a proposal for your PhD. So that might actually start you off well for your PhD. So after they do an analysis of your needs, after you also say what training requirements you have, your supervisor say, they'll decide what kind of funding to set you up for. Now, the studentships are organized around 6 challenge-led pathways that reflect the Scottish Government's National Performance Framework and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, these are pathways such as communication, AI, and new tech. There is environment, migration, there is health and well-being, there is social inequalities, and like 2 other such pathways. Now, the thing is, as Ishita mentioned, they are big on interdisciplinarity. So you don't have to think, oh, what exactly does my work fall into? I know it also falls into something else, and so on and so forth. Just apply to whichever. And also, when I was applying, they also let us apply to multiple pathways. But then it was not challenge pathways, and it was more subject-based pathways. So that might have slightly changed. You'll have to figure that out when you talk to your supervisors or the challenge pathway leads. But you can apply to multiple pathways, I think. And also, they also have an option of not applying to any of the pathways. You can say none of the above. And they have said on their website that this will not count against you. So basically, you have some flexibility in terms of how you want to set your project up, as far as you can convince them that this is a very necessary project that needs to be done. So again, as panelists have mentioned before, real world impact is something you want to focus on a lot, and say how this will, I don't know, help with policy or help with some anything else that you think it might contribute to. Also, there are no quotas for the pathways. So if you think, oh, should I apply to this pathway, but like the social inequalities are more popular pathway, so is it harder for me to get through that? They don't have that. So they are happy to have as many people in any of the pathways as necessary. They don't have like, 3 for this, 3 for that, etc. Now, of course, as the other panelists have mentioned, there's a 30% cap for international applicants, but they also say that they don't have to fulfill that 30% necessarily. So don't let them do that. Make good applications, make them fulfill the 30% that they have to do for international students. And also, they have changed their submission period a bit. They used to have like, they have, for me, for example, I'll have 1 year of unfunded period at the end where I can finish writing and submitting, but they're changing that. They're making it a 3.5 period in which you do have to submit. So that might be a bit of an issue, but you'll figure that out later, I guess. Overall, I think it's a great funding to have, because they have a lot of training workshops that happen in different universities across Scotland, and they pay you to attend this workshop. They set you up, they do your accommodation, lodging, everything else. Other than that, you also have the classes. You have a lot of ways to work in collaboration with students from other universities who are working in the same DTP. So it's a great scholarship, and also because I used to have JRF before this, which has to get once every 4 months. So I'm really just happy to have regular funding coming in. That's nice for me. Overall, I think you should definitely apply for one of these DTPs. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I think again a lot of things have been covered, and there'll be a lot of repetition for Grand Union DTP as well. But I'll try to make it as quick and as succinct as possible. So the Grand Union is actually named after the Grand Union Canal, which connects I think London, Milton Keynes, and Oxford. So that's why you have University of Oxford, the Open University, which is in Milton Keynes, and Brunel University, which is in West London. So I think from now to 2028, they are going to give 35, at least 35 studentships every year. And there are 23 training pathways. What pathways are has been covered earlier. The stipend, again, 19,237. And if you're in London, it's slightly higher. One very important thing, I don't know if I've missed it, if anyone has missed it. They do not cover your visa and IHS costs. So upfront, you'll have to pay for your plane ticket, for your visa application, and for your IHS, which is the health surcharge, which is a considerable amount. I think if you're doing a 3.5, 4 years PhD, it will come around 4 or 5 lakhs, something like that. So that's one thing that you have to spend in the beginning. After that, there is funding support for other things. I don't know if universities in some cases cover, but in my case, I did not have that. Application process basically just choose the pathway, submit the university application, and then either your DTP application would be alongside your university application, which I think is the case in Oxford, or you might have a separate DTP application, which was the case in Brunel for me. So yeah, what goes into the DTP application has been covered earlier, your research summary, your personal statement, what kind of prior research training you have had. And training doesn't just mean academic training, but other sorts of training, impact and collaboration plans. Now, this is important because you really want to show them that you're thinking about impact, which is their priority. So apart from your own project, there are also collaborative projects. So where you have non-academic institutions have already partnered up with one of these universities and they have a project ready, and then they want a PhD researcher on that. So in this case, you don't need to create your own project. You sort of have to fit within that project. Now, what these projects are clearly advertised on the website, and they have specific details of who to apply to. Then there are some studentships which are ring fenced for advanced quantitative methods or data skills. And also it does not always have to fall purely within the ESRC ambit. So if it is, let's say, a little bit interdisciplinary, where at least 50% of your research plan falls within the ESRC ambit, and let's say other 30-40% falls within the ambit of AHRC, which is the Arts and Humanities Research Council, they would still consider. But now these are very qualitative decisions to make, but you really have to make a case that, oh, this is interdisciplinary, but mostly it is an ESRC ambit project. After you get your award, you will be entitled to funding for your overseas fieldwork. If you want to do a foreign language training or difficult language training, which you have mentioned in your application, you'll have funding for that, for conferences, for overseas institutional visits. Hitesh has spoken about it. Placement. Now, placement again is a very tricky thing because ideally, what would happen is that you would stop your studies, you'll do a full-time placement, and then you resume your study. But for international students, that becomes very difficult because this has serious visa implications. So, this, yeah. So this has visa implications. So Oxford has made clear university rules wherein they have said that this placement is an integral part of the PhD, and therefore the visa implications are a little lesser. They are not very clear about this process in Open and Brunel, and they deal with it on a case-to-case basis. They also have funding for you to host an interdisciplinary event. So they have around £1,000 where you can host an event on interdisciplinary research. So that is there. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I had added it earlier. Anyway, there are, can you go back to the previous slide? Yes, there are 4 criteria which I think was shared earlier, and I can share it in the chat as well. You'll be graded on those 4 criteria, and those 4 will be of equal weightage. So have a look at that. Hitasha, please add if I have missed anything.
No, nothing to add here.
Okay. That's all from us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. That was a very comprehensive session, and I hope everyone found it helpful. So I know that we are over time, which is okay because we have the second part of this session tomorrow. So maybe if everyone is okay, we can wait for a few minutes to take any questions. And if not, then, we have tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m. IST to 3 p.m. IST for a Q&A session. But if there's any immediate questions that people want to ask now, perhaps we can take them. Again, if you have a question, you can raise your hand and ask the question or put it in chat. Yeah, the scheme.
Hi, thank you so much for this session. I just had one question with regard to that we have to mention that if we have gone through any trainings, quantitative or qualitative research methodology. So currently I am enrolled in a PhD program and we are having a quantitative and qualitative research module, course module. So so in this case scenario, where do I how do I reflect that I have gone through some trainings? Or is it like, I mean, would it be, should I be cautious to not mention that I haven't been gone through any trainings? Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say it's about a friend because that's how I want to say things legally. So a friend of mine who was in the first year of their PhD in India asked their supervisor if they should mention that they're in the first year, and their supervisor advised against it. Because otherwise the funding body can be like, why should we fund a PhD for you if you're already doing it? So in that case, it might be safer to mention modules you have done in your master's, which would have some training elements in it, and not necessarily bring your PhD up, but you might want to talk to your supervisor about it and see how they feel.
Right. Thank you so much for that advice.
I would also, I mean, intuitively that comes to my mind that it may not reflect properly that you're leaving a PhD program and starting another one. If there's a roundabout way of showing it without mentioning that you were enrolled in a PhD program, that might be helpful, but I don't know how you would do it.
There's one question in chat, how to include the collaborative aspect in the DTP application. Also, should the impact be focused on a global aspect or a localized regional aspect?
I can take that one. I think it entirely depends on what project you are talking about. I'm assuming that within your application, how will you show that you'll have collaboration? So if your project is specific to a location or region, you would start with that, and then you would also talk about broader sort of, more global implications. For example, I look at peace education, but within a specific region in India. So of course I have to start with that how maybe, I'll do workshops or I'll have exhibition of some of my findings, and I'll speak with people in the region, educators, NGOs, do some work with them. And then sort of to a more global, quote unquote, aspect, which would be that, what I learn here or the findings that I have here will have implications in other multicultural contexts as well. and peace education within multicultural context is something that is a global thing. It's not specific to my region. So I think having starting grounding it in your project and then connecting it to broader discourses in that field would be how I would go about it. But happy to hear what others.
Uh, So I have this component in my PhD project. So it's also because I'm also using one of the methodology as an activist ethnography, where you are, trying to organize or do something on the ground as well. So that was part of it, but this came out later, not during the applications. So during the applications, I had, few kind of organizations in my mind with which I can potentially collaborate, but not really, I'm not sure about it. So that also we can put it in that. It shouldn't be always, NGO or, a kind of action research thing, organizations and everything. It can be some kind of institution which might have particular data which you need, and you will collaborate with them to have the access to that data, and maybe organize some workshops once you analyze or collect the data for people, or organize some kind of small conferences. So that kind of, yeah, that could be anything. So within LISS DTP, we have these two more funds called SLAF and FLAP. SLAF is student-led activity fund, which you can use, to collaborate with organizations, and you can organize events, or maybe, some workshops for if directly people are involved, and maybe some even film screening is also fine within that, or anything like that. So it's always good to mention it, because it has a bit of weightage in the application, but as I said, that should not be always the action kind of thing. It could be anything like organization, or even another educational institution within India maybe, or somewhere else which has something to offer for you. That also covers overseas international visit, but that is very different than this collaboration. This collaboration, you work along with them on some specific aspects of your research. So that's always helpful to identify at first, and potentially you might collaborate, but even if you're not sure, you can still mention it and try to find such institutions or organizations, or even people, individuals as well. It's fine.
I just quickly add a point to this is that like I think Abhishek also mentioned that it depends on your project. How I do not have an organization with whom I would collaborate it essentially, but because my work, my research tries to look at caste and housing, I made a point in my proposal and also in the impact that saying, considering the Indian diaspora has increased to such an extent in the US, in the UK, and US having passed a law against caste discrimination, that could be by my strong point. And considering my degree is in planning, uh, I could sometime in the future use my research to help your country, or see how the Indian diaspora is working with respect to that. So even if there was no collaborative aspect as such with the organization, but the larger impact was that there are, you can maybe work with a planning authority in a city, as developing some collaboration.
And remember, they're not going to hold you accountable for every word that you're mentioning in an application. So at this point, you are just saying reasonably, I think I can do all of these things. If you don't do them, no one's going to do anything about it. But yeah, it should have reasonable connection. It should make sense. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'll pass a UN GA resolution or something. That's far-fetched. But yeah, otherwise, it should have just reasonable connection to your project.
Sorry, on the topic of collaboration, just because I won't be here tomorrow, I want to say that SGASSS has a open collaborative something studentship where where a supervisor can have a project which they're collaborating on with another organization, any sort of organization, and you can apply for studentships through that. They also have supervisor-led studentships which will open in early 2025. Where the supervisor will have designed the project and you apply to work in it. So this you can look up in the course of time, some time for that.
Great. I think we don't have any more questions, which is also fine, because we are way over time, and we have a session tomorrow as well. So I will end the session now, and remind everyone that we are doing a Q&A breakout room style session tomorrow on the ESRC scholarships. The session will be at 2 p.m. IST, so please do join that. And thank you so much, Hitesh, Abhishek, Ishita, Jyoti, Rupa, and Hitasha for joining us today and for speaking to everyone, and really for being so comprehensive with your presentation. I'm sure it would be really helpful. And thank you everyone who joined us today. Hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Thank you everyone. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And